Band Life Podcast! You are listening to the Band Life Podcast, your number one guide on how to run a profitable band. Here are your hosts, Pete Stannard and Adam West, the Wizard of Rock!
We're back, baby. We're back.
Hello, and welcome to the Band Life Podcast. I am your host, Pete Stannard, and I am here with the wonderful Wizard of Rock himself, Mr. Adam West. How are you on this rather rainy day here in Brighton? Gonna be honest.
Wet.
Wet. Is it wet in Wales?
It's wet everywhere, mate. Everywhere.
Wales isn't renowned for being wet, is it?
Oh,
So, episode 21, my friend, we are going to look at what I think is the greatest threat to a music artist's career and how we overcome that threat.
right.
It's going to get deep, my friend. So, what we do, we're going to start with what that threat is. Then, we've got your turn to slap someone, Adam. And then I'm going to give you some helpful hints and tips how you can overcome what is, I think, the greatest threat to music artists, I think.
I'm intrigued now.
Yes.
I'm not going to look at the notes anymore. I'm intrigued.
I'm intrigued. You're going to do this by the seat of your pants. Quite literally. Okay. I think the greatest threat to a band's music career right now is AI generated music. And like I said, I'd even go as far to say that AI music threatens producers, songwriters, composers, recording studios, and the entirety of the recorded music industry.
Oh, dude.
And so this is why I feel when it's there, and we did actually predict this very early on. I think it's episode 2 or 3 when we looked at Suno, didn't we? And we actually produced some music, and from memory we were saying that this is going to be a big problem going forward. The reason that I've come up with this now and not sooner is because of there are now AI generated bands on Spotify in particular. You may have heard of a band called Velvet Sundown, which is quite recently come out as being entirely AI generated. Why it's such a threat is because they've currently got, as of recording, they've currently got over 1.2 million monthly streams, which an artist like yourself and myself would give a right leg for, to be honest, especially when you hear the numbers on this, my friend. It's not all doom and gloom. There are ways, but we'll come to the ways later on. The main issue for me, and I think the main issue, certainly from this podcast perspective, because we are about the business of being in a band, of being a music artist, is how money is earned within the industry. For those who don't know, this might be the first time you're hearing this podcast, artists make their money through streaming platforms via royalty systems. Most platforms use the pro rata system. There is another system called the user-centric system, but little to no platforms use that as a royalty model, which I think is it benefits the artist more than the major record labels, shall we say. So that's why I think the user-centric isn't being used as prominently as it should, because the majors still have big control over the streaming platforms because they're major investors. Spotify is being basically propped up a lot of the time by major labels.
So only quickly, Pete, can you tell some of the listeners or new listeners a quick brief for user-centric system for artists?
So the user-centric system means that when you listen to an artist on a streaming platform, the money that you've put into that streaming platform, if that's via subscription, will go to that artist. With the pro rata system, what happens is the money is pulled into one big pot, and then it's distributed out depending on who is more popular. So who's got more market share, essentially.
So how do you know which platform's doing which then?
You'd have to dig into it, but generally the only platforms that I've come across that do a user-centric system is SoundCloud and Tidal do a version of user-centric. They don't actually, I think they call it a fan-centric system. The kind of the way to look at this, I think, is that Spotify will take a 30% cut of that pool and then distributes the remaining 70% to artists, whether they're signed or what they would call rights holders, I suppose would be the correct terminology. And then they're paid via the digital service providers. And so in a way, the digital service providers have a bit of a gatekeeping thing because some of them have thresholds themselves before they will pay. And things like that. So things get very complicated very quickly. So I'm going to try and keep this as simplistic as possible.
Please do.
I think it's important to consider the 70-30 split. And a lot of people might think that, that's great for artists having a 70% split. That's quite generous. Okay. There are about 11 million artists on Spotify. And obviously not all artists receive royalties because they don't hit the 1,000 stream threshold per annum and that sort of thing. But it's actually quite interesting because Spotify refuses to disclose how many artists actually receive royalties.
Well, then, if that's the case, it's probably
it's probably for the vast majority. But they do boast that they paid out $8 billion in royalties in 2024.
They boast that, yeah, but we all know half of them lie as well. I mean, they've been put up in front of Congress or bloody any kind of panel and asked to prove it, and they can't because they always divert the question. Not them specifically, probably, but it's not just probably the music platforms, actually, but just, what people like. They're like, yeah, that's what we do. And the moment they're asked to produce this evidence, they can't.
We can only go by what the numbers are given. And I think there are independent bodies that look into these things. And from my research, I couldn't see anyone disputing that number. Anyway, back to this Velvet Sundown and AI music. So Spotify pulls at 70%, then distributes that money to its artists, or the rights holders, sorry, we should say, because it doesn't always go directly to the artist because you've got things like record companies and stuff involved. The total dollar amount will depend on various factors, including the amount generated that month and regional differences and things like that. So I need to make that clear so that people understand that it's not as simplistic as you get 0.00007 cents per stream or anything like that. It's actually a very complex system. Do you want to hear some numbers, my friend, about this Velvet Sundown?
Go for it.
Go for it. So, if the Velvet Sundown, they generate 1.2 million monthly streams, okay? To put that into financial perspective, that means that they would receive £4,128 or $4,800 per month. So that translates to around about 50 grand a year for whoever this AI creator is. You've got to understand as well, this probably isn't this definitely isn't a band. This is probably one person typing in a prompt. With a band, if you'd earned 50 grand a year, generally that would be split between band members in some way, depending on what agreement you've got.
And
with your
what each
bandmates
person doing. Yeah, that's
and
right.
things like that. So if you're in a 4-piece band, that would have been split 4 ways, for example. And when you're looking at this from the pro rata sense, that means that there's 50 grand a year that's this year that will be taken out of that pot that won't go to musicians and songwriters, those sorts of rights holders that have spent a lot of money producing their music, because that comes at a cost, but they've also spent time and energy learning their craft and getting things to a place where they're happy to release it. There's a psychological kick in the teeth, I think, for music artists when you just get someone going, write me a song about this, and it just churns something out, and they put that out, and then they're earning 4 grand a month from that, as opposed to someone that sits down, crafts a song, goes into a recording studio, records it, produces it really well, and they get 200 streams and get nothing essentially, and it's cost them in terms of time and everything else, you could say it's cost them possibly thousands upon tens of thousands of pounds to produce that song.
So, Pete, only quickly, right? What would you say is an average for yourself on what an artist spends completing an album with say, Greenwaves Productions?
Well, it depends on the size of how many songs you've got on that album.
So let's say we start with a basic of 10 songs, all averaging 5 minutes.
10 songs, you're probably looking, I would say, anywhere between 3 and 5 grand, depending on.
It's what it cost me, about 3 grand and some, with all the, I think, well, you include getting the album produced at a factory. Yeah, because I think either we touched on it or my mate or dad asked me. This is how I operate. I'm like, there's my project. I might look at what it could cost, and then I put some money aside. I do it. I'm done, and that's it. Right? I don't sit back and go, "Oh, pay that," and it's just money, right? And it pretty much doesn't. It's just, what is it? It's just fucking, it doesn't really exist. It's just there, right? So I'm like, I don't really play on it too much, but for this, I kind of did a brief overall of what it will cost, and I was thinking, so if you look at it, on average, most bands are going to be forking out, depending on which studio they go to, 3-5 grand. That's just to get the album digitally done, not including everything else.
If you were to go, okay, if I'm going to factor in the production costs and everything else, how much did you spend in rehearsals? Writing the songs, and flushing that stuff out, and all the rest of it.
That's a lot.
Then
man.
again, once you factor that in as well, the costs then will go from, let's say a top end 5 grand. Well, if you spent 3 months, say, in the rehearsal studios, at what, between 30 and 50 quid a day in there, if not more. I mean, in Brighton, I think you're looking at least maybe 50 quid a day to go into a rehearsal studio.
Shit.
Once you start to get into things like, record companies and stuff, once they start to get involved and things like that, and you start to get representation, these factors will start to come into it. They'll be like, oh, okay, well, we're going to charge you for rehearsal time because that's a part of the ecosystem of your band now. Back to Spotify in particular. Right. So, well, not just Spotify, but I think there's another kind of danger to this. And I'm not accusing Spotify or the record labels of anything at the moment, but I have a little prediction that may happen. They're in the business of making money. I think probably what will happen is, like we were talking about earlier, production costs are so high. Production costs, including rehearsal space and everything else, we've gone over how much that could be. So what's to stop record companies going, well, we don't actually need music artists anymore. We don't need to pay production costs. We don't need to pay rehearsal costs. We don't need to do any of that stuff because we can just generate music. We can put it out and we can generate a revenue in that way. They're not doing it at the moment. And like I say, I'm not accusing anyone of doing this, but I don't see how that's not a win-win for them. At the end of the day, they don't have to deal with the artists. They don't have to deal with the management. They don't have to deal with lawyers. They don't have to deal with anything apart from paying some intern to come up with a prompt that says, write me a song that's great.
I think that what will end up happening is, because I was talking to the dean about this, the bass player, and he said that he thinks it'll be a short-lived fad, if I remember his words correctly.
Right.
That although it's here, I don't think it'll be here long enough to gain popularity to take over the world, because there's too many people kicking off about it, and you'll never beat the type of thing that we still want to see, which is, you know, people honing their craft and doing it the old way. Because there's a lot of talk of the 80s, the old ways, and like as much as the way this system operates, it doesn't want that. It wants the new world in and the old world out. But I think if there's enough fight back, people will eventually go, nah, it's moving too fast, too quick. We don't like it. Done. It's a bit like laser discs and mini discs. Great. They just never quite did it. But CDs did, even though they're absolutely horrible and dog shite. Besides the point, it just took off, and it took off. And I think with this, I think they may have just bitten off more than they can chew, because we now have a growing number of people on many platforms really being able to voice their concerns. So we're actually using the tools that they're providing as a way of educating people now and saying, hey, do you think that's right? Do you think it's good? And people are actually looking at you using their own judgment and going, do you know what? I'm going to get the vinyl out. It's like, yeah, but that takes so long. It's like, yeah, but there's something a digital program or a digital creator might not quite understand if they're only in their 20s, is that it's not just the fact that I got to pull it out of the sleeve and put it there. It's that tactile contact. It's that organic feel that you don't get with the digital platforms. And yes, I agree. I'll probably mention it on one of our shows that it's much easier to sit here. If I'm preoccupied, I can put on, for example, Spotify, and they'll play me an album, and then it'll play something very similar, and on it goes, and I'm out there multitasking. Yeah, it's great for that, because I don't have to come in and change it. But it's not just about that, is it? It's about being able to appreciate the time and effort. And what's it? I mean, we said on one of the shows, we sit there, we used to have the headphones on, and be listening to the vinyl and reading the lyrics and opening the booklet inside the vinyl, the gatefold. You don't get that with digital. You sat there and you're going, right, what do I do? It's like, it's great, but you're submerging yourself into a story, into another thing.
Yeah, and I would be inclined to agree with you if the vast majority of people were music fans, as it were, like, and they understood the finer points of songwriting and production and everything else. Because if that were true, because I listened to some of the Velvet Sundown, and it's not very good. It's kind of mediocre at best. It's not terrible. I've heard worse. But it's not, it doesn't have the depth and the warmth that is expected from a good record, but it still found its way onto lots of users' playlists. And this is how it's got so big. So
it's easy listening background music, you know?
Yeah. So there's over I think it's 690 million monthly listeners on Spotify. I would say the vast majority of those people are what I would call casual listeners. I think you've got two types of people, broadly speaking. Obviously, there's going to be some grey areas and crossovers and things like that over individuals. But I think if you look at it very broadly, you've got two types of people. You've got casual listeners of music, and you've got music fans. Now, music fans appreciate the vinyl, they appreciate the quality of the songwriting and the quality of the production. But I think casual listeners really, they don't understand it, or they just don't give a crap. They don't give a crap that you've spent 2 weeks getting your snare reverb right. That sort of thing. All they do, like you say, they have it on in the background when they're down the gym or cooking or gardening or doing whatever they're doing, and it's just background noise to them, and that's it. And that's what the playlists are there for. And this is how I think you need to strategize as a music artist now, because if you can get onto those playlists, the vast majority of people will listen to playlists on Spotify, because the vast majority of people are casual listeners. And that's where the money is. And that's when there's a lot of money to be made, people will flock to that. I think we're going to see a lot of AI creators coming out on Spotify in particular, because playlisting on Spotify is what most people listen to. And that's how they're going to generate their royalties, through that.
Maybe there'll be a new platform that comes up, the AI music platform.
Maybe, and I think that will get to a mass point, and I think they will, at some point, Spotify will have to go, okay, look, we've got playlists that are identified. This is an AI playlist, and this is a human playlist, or something, or an artist playlist, or an AI created playlist, that sort of thing.
Well, they'd have to, because I think people are quite particular. It's like, are they? Like you said, I just want background music. I don't. Yeah. You generally get people that don't care.
They don't care.
Just need music.
Literally don't care. I think you could probably test it, right? If you're brave enough to walk up to strangers. If you walked up to a stranger and said, "What's a snare?" they would go, "I don't know." I have no idea what a snare is. Yeah, they might know that there are drums, there are guitars, there are singers, or even bass guitars and that sort of thing. A lot of people can't even identify what a bass guitar is from a 6-string guitar or a rhythm guitar or whatever. And I think that this is the problem, is that we talk to a lot of people who are music fans, because birds of a feather flock together, as it were. But I think the vast majority of people who aren't particularly into music but listen to music or have music on, they don't care that a song is well produced, or it's well written in any way. They don't even understand the process of writing a song. They don't understand that something's in 4/4 or 3/4 or 12/8 or whatever, that sort of thing. Why would they care whether it's generated from an AI or whether someone sat down and crafted a song for 6 months? You got to understand your audience as a music creator in general. If you're going to actually have people listen to your music, because there's so much noise now, which is going to get, I think, hugely more. And like I say, I think it will get to a critical mass kind of situation. And they're going to have to kind of go, okay, let's try to separate things out so people can identify what is AI and what isn't. But I think for a lot of people, they don't care anyway. So even if you put on that, this is an AI generated playlist, they're going to be like, well, I'm cooking, I'm cooking dinner. What do I care whether they've spent 6 months on it or 2 minutes?
Or that snare's a particular brand of
Boeing.
That was made from a particular rare piece of wood.
Yeah, that sort of thing. The only people that care about that is musicians and music fans. Everyone else,
saddles.
Well, they're just interested in other things, aren't they, at the end of the day? So it just depends on what they are. And like I say, when record companies, and possibly even Spotify, because I think Spotify will be like, how do I get some money from the 70% that we're giving out? Well, why don't we just start putting music out? Then they become a part of the 70% pool, and we can push that algorithmically because we own the algorithm. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Money, money, money. It's a business.
Pete, don't give him ideas.
Win,
man.
win, win. Believe me, he's probably had this idea before. The only conflict of interest he'll have is with the record companies, because they're big investors in Spotify. So, but then the record companies are going to be like, well, why are we spending money on artists and all the other stuff that goes with artists when we can just generate music and put it out, and we can speak to Daniel Ek directly and say, look, you got to push this for us, because otherwise we're not going to invest in your company anymore.
Doggy dog.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you're a generous soul, which I'm sure you are, why not buy Adam and myself a cup of coffee? You could do that at buymeacoffee.com/The Band Life Podcast.
This brings us, I think, nicely to Adam Slap.
I want to slap venues or / promoters or organizers of events that they post up asking for bands to play or drop a link, play their venue or drop a link. Okay. And when you do, again, there's no communication, there's no response, there's no email. It just doesn't seem to be, you have a venue.
Right. Sorry. What are you dropping a link to? What, to the venue itself or to the event?
No. So what annoys me is you have a venue that wants to put on live acts.
Yeah.
And they're saying, drop your band link or send us an email. Right.
Oh, okay. So you're sending a link to them about like a Spotify link or a YouTube link or whatever. Or okay.
And basically, you don't get a response back and you don't get an email, even after multiple emails.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be a middle person that organizes. So you got someone who runs the pub, the bar, pays the staff. And they also seem to be doing the promoting and the socials. And they're not doing what we've been talking about, and that's delegating, right? And as a result, bands have got to go through other websites like gigs, whatever they're out there looking for gigs. But then you go through the whole process again. There just doesn't seem to be anything solid or in place that helps bands out. And then what really annoys me is when you go online, you see all these bands, I got these gigs. I'm like, you've been around for 10 seconds.
I'll give you that one, my friend. I agree with you. You get the slaps for venue owners and promoters or gig organizers that don't get back to you.
My head in.
And generally they can do one. Right, enough of that.
I love that slap, mate. I love the backhander.
The question is, how do music artists address this problem of AI creators in the industry now, which I personally think is going to be at some point possibly a tsunami of stuff, especially as someone easily making 50 grand a year, they're going to go, well, I'm going to at least give that a try. And there's nothing to stop them trying. And, I'm not saying exactly. If you could make an easy 50K, why wouldn't you try? I suppose is the obvious. I feel the best approach is by examining what made Velvet Sundown successful in the first place and why this is a little bit of an anomaly. I still think, even though it's an anomaly, it's not going to stop people from trying because there's money involved. I wouldn't sort of discount anything at the moment. There's always two elements, whether you're an AI creator or whether you are a musician trying to put your music out. The two key elements that contribute to the success of any band is music itself and the marketing. That's it. You get those two bits right, you're on to a winner. But you've also got to be realistic, okay? Great music with mediocre marketing will only get you so far, okay? And it pains me to say this. Mm-hmm. Mediocre music with great marketing can propel you to stardom. And that's the case, I think, with Velvet Sundown. Because the music's not good. Musically, it's not going to win any awards. But like I say, I have heard worse from human artists on Spotify. Most listeners are casual listeners. You've got to kind of keep that in mind. But also, we've got to have this presuppose here that people want to make money from their music. That's what this podcast is about, because this is about the business of being in a band. At the same point, going back to the quality thing, I'm not advocating that you should compromise in quality, but we've got to kind of face the reality that only true music fans care about this sort of stuff. The important thing to remember is that true music fans are the people that you want in your ecosystem.
Yes.
Going back to another episode where we did the ecosystem stuff, because they're the people that will spend money. Casual listeners aren't going to go to your gigs. They're not going to buy your merchandise. They're not going to buy your album. They may give you a passing glance on a playlist, but that will be it. And from a business perspective, they're not really your audience, but they are your marketing potential.
You've got to get them signed up to give, so you can have their email.
Yes.
And that's what
that's the music fans, the casual music listeners. They're not going to sign up because they're not invested. They don't care about you. That brings back to the marketing part. And I'm not saying that you should ignore casual listeners, because from a marketing perspective, in this situation, casual listeners are actually very important. There's a certain irony as what happened with the Velvet Sundown when it comes to marketing, because there was a lot of speculation around whether they were AI generated or not, but it fueled this. So because so many people were talking about whether they're AI or not online, Spotify crawls the internet to see what's blowing up. It doesn't really look at what the content is. It's just seeing how many people are talking about you. It doesn't care about what's being said. So the more people were talking about it and they were engaging with those posts, and they were sharing those posts around and things like that, the more the algorithm went, well, this band or this artist is blowing up.
This is
so algorithmically, we're going to push that on Spotify because they're blowing up on the internet. So from a marketing perspective, if you can get people talking just about you, then you can trigger something in the algorithm that pushes you more. When you kind of consider those two factors of, the music and the marketing, then you can adapt your strategies to fit your goals. Thinking of this from a more practical kind of point of view is the music quality thing. The quality has to be above what AI can do for music fans to appreciate what we're talking about. Music fans appreciate good sonic quality, just generally great songwriting and production. If you're going to appeal to music fans, you have to produce that. If you're not, then why are you wasting your time and your money and ultimately making it harder for everyone else in the industry, including yourself? And I'm not saying this to be harsh or to put people down. I'm saying it as a point of, okay, if it's not good enough, go away and make it better. I'm not saying you should just give up. All I'm saying is that look at it and, speak to people. Try to speak to producers and if that are at least above what would be your level, as it were. Whenever I get someone, emailing me say, can you listen to my song? I always give it a listen. I always give them an honest appraisal of it. And generally, if you give it, certainly to people you don't know, that you're probably going to get a better, a more honest, you would hope, appraisal of it. Because if you give it to your mum's going to be like, oh, it sounds great. Because she doesn't want to hurt your feelings. I don't understand why artists are so precious about, we can't have people listening to our music before we release it, sort of thing. that kind of precious
What are you
kind
afraid
of
of, innit?
mentality. Yeah, exactly. Where if you're not confident enough, then you definitely shouldn't be releasing it. If you're not confident within yourself. But if you are going into a studio, this is something that we talked about a lot in past episodes, is pre-production. I can't bang on about pre-production enough. It's something that I do with my clients, and the more detail I get, I always get a better outcome. The more we dig into it, the more work we do in pre-production, the end result, I think, always turns out a lot better than if I get kind of sketchy stuff. Plus, it tends to be the sessions run a lot smoother. So the outcomes are always better. The sessions run a lot smoother. There's a lot less time burnt in the studio as well.
Agreed. Yeah.
So if you're paying per hour and you're like, I'll know it when I hear it, you're going to run out of money really, really quickly.
Yeah, that's
at the end of the day. Well, I'll know it when I hear it. And I'm like, no, that's not how you should be working this. You should have a vision and you should be able to go, this is what I want.
Well, that's just that's foolish and a waste of money, isn't it?
It is. Secondly, what we have to do, going back to what we were talking about. So I think artists, they kind of have to move away from the belief that Spotify is this ultimate platform, because obviously streaming strategies are going to vary depending on your goals. Spotify is great for music discovery. That's it. But if your goal is to make money or, get charting and things like that, then Spotify is not the place for you. Your goals become very relevant to any kind of strategy that you do. In previous episodes, I've kind of I have suggested SoundCloud to be a better place because it has the user-centric system, and I still consider it to be a good option when it comes to generating revenue for your royalties and things like that. I think Tidal is another one to look at for artists, purely because they have the user-centric system. Again, it's, from what I can see, it seems to be geared a bit like SoundCloud, where it's geared towards the hip hop genres, but there is a lot of metal on there, a lot of rock and metal on there.
I don't see many bands promoting and advertising Tidal,
no,
to be honest.
But I'll give you an example why this is at least a good business decision. Velvet Sundown, they're generating 1.2 million monthly streams. Okay, if they were to do that on Tidal, they would be earning over $12,000 a month, because their royalty rates are so much higher. So Tidal's royalty rate is 0.0013 per stream, as opposed to Spotify's 0.0004. Tidal operates on a hybrid model system, which is similar to what we discussed in episode 13 on how music streaming should be structured, which was my vision of a streaming platform. It's close to that, which I was quite surprised at. Tidal uses a pro rata system, but also features, they call it direct to artist model, that allows subscribers to allocate a portion of their subscription, which is usually about 10%, directly to the artists they support. Additionally, they have a fan-based system, which essentially implements the user-centric system. The different systems are tied to the subscription package that you choose. You can choose to do a pro rata system, you can choose to do an allocated system, or you can choose to do a user-centric or a fan-based system, which is quite nice. That's leaving the choice to you as a subscriber, which is fair. Like I say, the downside to that is that they don't have the same discovery that Spotify has, because obviously they don't have the number. Discovery is all about numbers. And when you have a platform that has, was it 600 20 million monthly listeners. This isn't just people, this is monthly listeners. You can't ignore that, and I think you would be a little bit remiss to ignore that. What I would do is, like I've said in previous episodes, is to treat Spotify like it's a radio station.
Yeah, singles.
Yeah, you put singles on Spotify, have a showcase mindset on it for potential fans. If you get onto a playlist, people will go, oh, I really like that song, I'm going to go check that band out. They're the music fans that are on Spotify, people like yourself, for example, that when you're doing your gardening, you hear a song, oh, I really like that riff or whatever. I'm just going to go and check that band out. They'll stop what they're doing and have a little look. Casual listeners won't do that. They'll just go, oh, I like that. That's cool. That's a cool song. But carry on with what they're doing. And that's kind of the difference, I think, between music fans and casual listeners. I would be selective about what I put onto Spotify, and then only put songs on Spotify that I feel could or has a potential to be playlisted. I wouldn't even think about putting an album out on Spotify. I'd be like, it's all singles. And the rest of your songs, I would put complete catalogs on things like Bandcamp, Tidal, SoundCloud, or purely a physical format, something like that. Obviously, and then it's depending on your genre, because obviously in our world, Bandcamp's quite a prominent thing, rock and metal. Obviously, these strategies are going to depend on your goals. But what I would say is that, if we go back, back in the day when you were producing an album, when I first started out in the industry, when I was a session artist, we would produce for an album anywhere between 15 to 20 songs, but you would get sort of 12 songs on the album, and the rest would either be thrown away or there'd be B-sides.
B-sides, yeah.
B-sides, going back to the good old days of vinyl singles. So for those who do not know, back when vinyl was king, when you bought a single, you'd have an A-side, which would be the song that you bought, the single that you bought. On the other side would be the B-side, which would be a song, but it wouldn't be on the album. And there was a while there where bands would put out B-side albums.
Yeah, I know a band that's done it. They've done B-sides and rarities. I was listening for the first time in like 20 years. I've been listening to Paradise Lost. I listened to disc 2 of the rarities thing they did, and I'm like, there's some stuff on there. They done an amazing 2 version of So Much Is Lost with synths and stuff, and I was like, wow, it's such a beautiful song.
Yeah. Why didn't that get onto the album?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it was the same length, but I'm just like, wow, I like that more.
It wasn't considered to be commercially viable by the record label at the time. Nirvana's Incesticide album is a collection of B-sides and sessions from the John Peel Show. This is the thing when things become very overly produced, I think, is that you lose a lot of musicality within the sound itself, within the performance itself. There's nothing quite like, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 musicians in a room just playing.
Yeah, this is the type
and
of
creating magic.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like that. And this is what we try and do here. So when we record the drums, everyone plays together, and then we'll overdub everything else. Because I think as long as you can get that sound within the drums, and we record the guitars and everything, so you can kind of get a vibe for it coming back when you record the overdubs for it. But I find the performance varies very little once you do the overdubs, once drum tracks have been recorded.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that one, because we did a very old EP once, and Linda said, just all jump in there, I'll do a live. We didn't know what was really going on at the time.
Yeah, I much prefer that. Large format recording studio, where you have a nice big live space and everyone's in it. You're talking kind of Abbey Road-esque sort of size sort of thing. Here I found a nice medium there to get everyone in a room. It's not a massive space, but everyone is in the same room, even me as an engineer. I'm in the same room. I end up sort of running around and moving mics around and things like that to get nice room sounds and things like that, obviously depending on what we've done in pre-production. And this is why I say that we'll bang on again.
Bang on again,
it's so massively important. It's so massively overlooked. It's just mind-blowing to me that you'd have producers and engineers that have no idea what the artist's vision is at the end of the process, literally coming in and going, well, okay, I'm just going to record some drums. They might be able to record drums very well, and they might get something that sounds great even. It's that little extra sort of 5%, I think, that will make that big difference. And it's that 5% that takes a huge amount of work in the pre-production side of things. And that's what I'm saying, is that I think this is why it's overlooked a lot, is that people think, oh, it's only that little 5% more. But I think that 5% is what goes from good to great, or from great to fantastic. And I think that if you're not aiming for that, especially given what we're talking about with quality, then you're going to struggle at the end of the day. If you can't get that, and obviously it's within the confines of what you think sounds great, because this is a subjective thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I've produced stuff that I've gone, it's not really something that I think is particularly great, but the artists have gone, this sounds awesome. This is better than, I've even had a comment of, this sounds better than Dream Theater.
Wow.
That sort of thing. I was like, yeah, it's okay. The quality is there, and it's got radio play and things like that. So obviously the standard there is hit. Is how much you want to go above that standard. So I always look at it from the point of view, if you walk out of here, you're going to get something that at the bare minimum for me is going to be radio ready. Anything above that depends on how much pre-production we've done. With what we're talking about, this AI stuff, you could probably bring that level down a bit and go, okay, if you're releasing purely on streaming sites, then that level now has to be above Suno, or above Udio, above whatever AI generation platform is doing. If you can't hit that, then I would have some serious thoughts about how you can bring up the quality above that. Because if you're not, then you're just going to get lost behind all of that sort of stuff. Well, and a lot of the time, that is it. That's what it comes down to. And a lot of the time, it's about bringing the human element back into music. Music is so overly produced now, it's actually quite annoying. I think. Yeah. To be brutally honest, especially in metal, everything is so precise. It's bang on. It's like, why can't we have a little bit that's just a little bit funky, a little bit out of time, a little bit?
This is what we've been talking about lately. We agree totally, man.
You're kind of hearing things that are very slightly out, but I like the fact that that's like, because it's added a little bit of swing to it. It's added a little bit of, all right, this section's a little bit more backed off, but then it goes into something, and that impact is now a lot more. Well, going back to those kind of B-side albums and this kind of more live feel from Nirvana, for example, is that they're not thinking about the timing. They're just playing it and they're feeling it out. When they're generally they've got quiet verses, loud choruses. When they're playing those verses, they're laying back and they're like, yeah, we're going to get there. Don't worry, we'll get there. And then there's a little kind of build and then boom. And that boom becomes way more prominent because they were laid back. If everything's da 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 at some metronomic number, some BPM number, and then you just put, I'm going to put that up by 5 BPMs. Well, you're not really going to notice that so much. People aren't going to go, oh, it's an extra 5 BPM in that in that section. But if you're going from like 80 BPM to 100, kind of bringing it back to the AI thing, that sort of thing is going to set you apart, I think, from these AI creators. Because you got to remember that AI is only a facsimile of what's been done previously. If you're producing something that's uniquely you, that should shine through. Biggest problem is going to be the saturation issue. So because of new technology, I think the landscape is always going to change, and you're going to have to learn to adapt no matter what. AI is the current threat. Once AI is going, there will be a whole new raft of something going on.
That's it. Yeah, go on.
I'd be concerned to the extent of how do we adapt, rather than being concerned to the extent of, oh, well, I'm just going to pack up and go home.
See, I personally don't think AI is that much of a threat, because I'm not threatened by it. I'm annoyed, slightly annoyed by it, but I'm also equally annoyed by the saturation.
It all comes down to your goals as an artist.
Yeah.
And if your goal is, I would, as a music artist, say, I'm happy and successful if I've put out something that I am proud to put out with.
Yeah.
So that, for me, is a level of success. Everything over and above that is a bonus. Okay.
Sure.
But at the same point, see why, especially independent artists are seeing this as a threat, because if this is your work, this is your livelihood, if you're in a position where, like, I make my money from my music, then that income stream is at threat, because that's, the realities of life is you got to pay your mortgage, you got to, put food on the table, clothes on your back, and that sort of stuff. If your music is doing that for you, why should you change that? If you're doing something that you love and you're making money at it, then when something threatens it, then you're going to have to adapt if you want to keep living in that lifestyle that you have.
Yeah, well, that's a fair argument. I mean,
I always say we've got a creative bucket and a business bucket that we, going right back to the first episode, I think we talked about this. From a creative bucket, that for me, a successful release is producing something that I'm proud to release. That's success within itself. But from the business perspective, it's, well, how do I generate an income from the success of my creativity? And a big part of me that said, well, why can't those two things coalesce? Why can't they live there? There's a lot of artists out there that say, well, why should people pay for my art, sort of thing? I'm like, well, why shouldn't they pay for your art?
Well, they should pay for your art, actually.
Exactly. I look at it from that perspective, and the majority of recorded music, people did pay for their art. It's only been the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years, I suppose, that people haven't been paying for music. It's only ever been since people have been sharing in the late 90s, I suppose, with the Napster thing. Before that, people bought albums. People bought physical products. And people paid for the privilege of listening to that music. And I think we've lost that along the way. And I think that's a little bit sad, because artists aren't going to be able to make a living, and they're not going to be able to produce the best work because they don't have the resources to do it.
We're certainly getting a lot thinner, and it's certainly getting a lot harder, because trying to survive life at the moment is number one priority.
And that's one of those things, is that if you are currently making music, you're making as an independent artist or even as a signed artist, if that's your source of income and AI is going to potentially take that income away, because there's the pool within the pro rata system is a finite amount of money. And the less popular you are, the less money you will get. By having AI creators being more popular, you will get less of an income. It's as simple as that.
How long do you think it's gonna last? That's the thing, isn't it? Because
That's a big question. That I think it will last to a point where a lot of AI creators aren't making any money anymore, which hopefully will happen very quickly. But it really depends on how saturated everything becomes. When you've got our, AI artists or AI creators making, $5,000 a month or whatever, close to $5,000 a month, you're going to get other people showing up for that, because $5,000 a month is a lot of money to a lot of people. It's low effort, high reward, isn't it?
Yeah.
Potentially.
It is, but I suppose
and those things always will attract, pretty much anyone with a laptop. Well, and I think the other kind of thing to think about is that if you're making your money from composing, from sync licensing as well, it's going to be a little bit of, well, why would a production company that's putting out a film, why would they spend potentially tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds on the music when they can just generate it? Well, thank everyone for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and do all the things that we love you for. Buy us a cup of coffee and that sort of thing.
Yes, by the way, we haven't promoted that for very
We've
much.
Not promoted that at all.
Look, I'm drinking Dandelion, dude.
Yeah,
I want coffee.
Water.
Council water. What's going on, guys? Buy us a coffee. Drop
Where's
the link.
The coffee?
Yeah, drop
Come
the link,
on.
Pete. Drop the link.
Jesus
Buy us
Christ. Buy us a coffee. Well, the link will be at the bottom, right? There it is if you want to note it down. buymeacoffee.com/the Band Life podcast.
Yeah, come on.
Buy us a cup of coffee. I'm thirsty. Okay, mate.
Right, it's not much to ask, right?
It's not a lot to ask. We just want your hard-earned money when you've not got any of it.
Yeah, exactly. Stop giving it away to Spotify.
Exactly, yeah. Cancel your Spotify subscription.
That's right.
And subscribe to the Band Life podcast. I'd take £11 a month from 60 million odd people. Yeah. And somehow only have no profit from that at all. No. That's how that works. Band Life podcast.